Hey, this is Manny Moonraker, and this is episode number 77. And this time I had the presence of mind to actually send out information on social media to let people know I'm recording today. And there's a reason for that. So, I have a special guest with me today, and I think you guys, not only are you going to enjoy the story behind why he has an interest in ufology and UFOs, but genuinely, he's a likable guy, but he has an idea that he wants to present to you, the UFO Buster Radio listener, and I had to bring him on so that we can chat about it. Now, you might have seen his name in the info I sent out, but everyone welcome Jeff Aldrich to the show.
Hello, Manny. Thank you.
Hey, Jeff, welcome to the show, and we've been in contact for some time now, emailing back and forth.
Yeah, we have. I think started in January, and that was actually right after an experience I had that prompted me to start looking into, who's out there studying this stuff and what they're seeing, and came across your show and really liked it.
So before we get started, because I think, as always, I think it's important that people get to know the folks that come on UFO Buster Radio, because it really is about presenting the perspective of ufology from the regular guy. Now, once in a while, I do get people on here who do research and spend a lot of their time looking into the topic, but if you listen to the Jennifer Stein show last year, she said it best. It's a grassroots movement. It is the grassroots that's going to get this solved, and she's pretty sure of it, and so am I. But before we get started, Jeff, I want to send out a shout out to Michael Dunning. Michael Dunning, we were supposed to have a live interview yesterday with Michael. However, life happens, and unfortunately, I wasn't able to get back in time to complete that interview. So some of you are familiar with Michael Dunning and his work on YouTube. We'll get to him sometime before the Aurora alien encounter. But right now, we've got Jeff. So Jeff, like I said, I like for people to know the background of individuals that come on the show. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I can be pedantic, so I'll try and summarize as best as I can.
Hey, take your time. We got plenty of time.
Background-wise, I do have a science background. I'm finishing up my Bachelor of Science in biology right now. I got 2 courses left. It's been a long road. And I'm 42 and just finishing that now. So everybody out there, it's never too late. Go learn stuff. You'll enjoy it, and it will definitely benefit you. So I do have a science background. I have been a writer for a long time, mostly in the gaming industry with tabletop games and video games. I am not a UFO nerd or necessarily a UFO enthusiast. People walk up to you and they want to, they're excited and they want to tell you all these stories and stuff, and they start mentioning various cases, and I don't really know them. I look them up and I'll have them tell them, but if they mention a case by name, I'm not necessarily going to be the guy that knows exactly what they're talking about. However, growing up, I read the books and watch the TV shows later on, and they're fun. They're kind of fuel for the imagination for me, but I'm certainly not a believer. I did have 2 experiences in my life that kind of shaped where I'm coming from now and why I wanted to kind of get into this and start talking to people. First of all, I'll start with the most recent, and that was on December 27th, just this past December 27th. I was driving down the road and happened to be looking up and saw something in the sky. I don't know what it is. I can guess as to what it's not, and I think that's just as important. But basically, it's just real short. It only lasted a couple seconds, but it was a green light. It shot straight down as if, from space, and then kind of stopped for just a millisecond and then took off at an almost 90-degree angle, but at kind of an arc, and then was gone. And that's all it was. It was a green light that did this weird behavior. And so I'm driving down the road thinking, okay, what is this thing? Certainly not an airplane. So I immediately go to meteor. I've seen those. I know they exist. We can prove that those are around. But it made this sharp turn and kind of almost stopped for just a brief millisecond before changing direction and going off. So that's not necessarily meteor behavior. And then I thought, well, maybe I'm at a weird angle from it, and it bounced off the atmosphere. So I'm trying to kind of put some of my old physics to use. I'm certainly not an expert, but, in order to bounce off the atmosphere, I think they have to come in at a pretty oblique angle. And this was not an oblique angle. It was straight down and then 90 degrees. So it was pretty bizarre. And anyways, so I drove on, and, I was thinking about it because it was weird. But I wasn't... I wasn't scared about it or really, going anywhere with what I thought it was or wasn't. But the next day, I got a message from a friend, and she said that she saw a UFO. She said that, and she described it as like a cigar-shaped object. And she saw it the next morning, and it was in roughly the same area that I saw mine the night before. So, my sighting was kind of 50%, and then hers was 50%, and it made me really start to think, okay, myself and this friend of mine, we're not UFO people, we're not looking for these things. We're not looking for UFOs at all. We just happened to see them. So I thought, well, this is kind of odd. So I started, digging into stuff and looking out on the internet, see, who's out there, who's talking about stuff. I knew about stuff like MUFON and things like that because you see them on the TV shows. Right. And I think everybody knows about them. So I kind of looked on their website, and they're pretty cool. I don't want to criticize them too much because that's not what this is about.
This is the show to do it. Jeff?
It was still, just to be brief, I went there first because I knew about them, and supposedly they're taking a scientific approach. One, they got a lot of videos on there, and it doesn't seem like they vet them too well because, for example, I saw one, and it was recorded by a college student looking out the window from his dorm room, and he sees this light outside, and I'm looking at it, and I'm like, that's a flashlight. It's either his buddy behind him reflecting into the window, or he's standing outside. I mean, you can see the plane of the glass of the front of the flashlight going up and down. And, this is on MUFON. And, maybe they're just taking the stance of, we're going to report everything and let you look at it. But, if you're going to say you're having a scientific approach, you really ought to maybe look into something like that rather than just stick it up there, because it's not doing anybody any good, at least in my opinion. And then, so moving on from MUFON, the other thing I started doing was looking at podcasts, and I went through a bunch, and I could only listen to a couple of minutes before I kind of wanted to yank my own teeth out. It's just no good. I mean, they weren't doing anything constructive. Even if they were having fun, they weren't really giving me what I wanted at the time, and that was information on what people are doing, what they say, what are people seeing? Are they seeing stuff like I saw? How are they handling it? What are they doing? And then I came across your show, Manny, and I never once turned it off. It was good stuff. And what really attracted me is you're using the approach that I am, and you're not assuming anything. You don't seem to have an agenda. You're not pushing a certain set of ideas. You're listening to people. You're being curious. That's the most important thing. Or one of the most important things. You're being curious, genuinely curious, and that's part of what attracted me. I obviously I didn't find any answers about what I saw, and I'm never gonna. You just have to accept that. as a science kind of person, that I don't have any data on it. I can't reproduce it. I remember what I saw. It was weird. It prompted me to look into other stuff, so that's good. As far as an encounter itself, it's just that there's absolutely zero data on it, so I can't give it to somebody else and have them look at it. So, but anyway, that's what really got me going, and I started talking to you after that, and you were really good about just talking to this regular guy out of nowhere.
Aren't we all regular guys?
Yeah,
we're all regular guys. We're all here talking about the weird and unknown. But you made a point just now about being able to reproduce those events and being able to gather data. But we'll get into that a little bit later on when we talk about your ideas as far as this particular topic. But when you saw that incident and you had that confirmation, what was your thought process at that time?
At the time that it was going on, I wasn't thinking about UFOs or anything really like that. I was just curious about this weird phenomenon that I saw, and right before my eyes. And I was going through the Rolodex of stuff I know, and it didn't match anything. So mostly I didn't question what I saw. I guess it's possible that I hallucinated it. That happens. I've never had that happen to me before, but who knows? And I don't know what that's like, so maybe it's like that. But then the message from my friend later on is what confirmed it. But to go back to what you said at the time, I was just kind of seeing what I saw. I wasn't really trying to, give it a big explanation. It was too short. It was too quick. I didn't have enough information. So mostly just kind of curious as to what I saw.
Now, you had a previous incident to this when you were younger, which is also kind of fascinating to me. But do you want to share that with them?
Absolutely. When I was a kid, I grew up in a rural area down in southwest Missouri, in the Ozarks. So whenever you hear the term hillbilly, that's where hillbillies come from.
Okay.
Southwest Missouri. So lived near a small town. We lived on a farm, about 40 acres, the typical American 40 acres. And I was a kid growing up in the 80s, so, obviously we didn't have internet. I wasn't cool enough to have an Atari. So when I got home from school, I'd throw my book bag down, grab a cookie, and run out into the fields and woods and stuff, and, come home at dinner. So you see a lot of stuff, and one day I was at the edge of our property, and where it kind of joins up with the corner of another farm, and looking through the barbed wire fence, and lo and behold, here is a dead cow. Now, out there, that's not necessarily a weird thing. You see dead critters all the time, and if a farmer has a cow die, it's not necessarily uncommon that they would go dump it in the corner of their property to feed the bugs and break down. Usually, they'll do stuff like bury it a little or pour lime on it to kind of help that process and make sure it's not generating disease. Right. So it was a little odd in that regard, because usually they do something. So anyways, as I got up to it, because, you're a kid and you got to explore this stuff, poke it with a stick. So I grabbed my stick, and it was a calf. And the first thing I saw, because it was pointed right at me, was the missing butt, like they describe on the cattle mutilation stuff. Okay. And it was cored out. I mean, there were no organs. That was the first thing that was obvious to me. There's a lot I don't remember, so I don't try and make up stuff that may or may not have been there, because I just simply don't remember. But I do remember that. because that's kind of what really caught my eye. So I'm looking at that. There's no organs. I don't remember organs being strewn around. They were just gone. And the weirdest thing was that the fecal matter was inside the cavity. And here's, I remember this part vividly, so I feel comfortable describing it this way.
Okay.
It was as if the organs had just evaporated around the fecal matter, and it was just this tube inside the cavity, placed neatly inside the cavity.
Wow.
And, so I'm thinking, well, if somebody's ripping out the guts, they're taking that stuff out, and then why are they just going to stick it back in there? That there's no reason for that. So that was really weird. I don't recall. I know that with the cattle mutilation reports, they talk about the lips and the tongue being removed. Mm-hmm. It's all soft tissue, basically, like eyes, internal organs, the flesh around the anus and that area. It's all soft tissue that's been removed. The only thing I remember was, like the organs and the anus area being cored out, like they say, and then that fecal matter sitting in there very neatly, as if, like I said, the organs had been evaporated around it. Now, if you're listening and you're saying, "Oh my God, yes, they used a laser," no, that's just the way I'm describing it. I don't know.
Right. I mean, that's actually how it happened. You were young. You weren't looking for artifacts of laser cutting
right.
and all that kind of stuff.
Exactly. That's just how I'm describing it to you. So don't make any assumptions about methodology or how it was done, because we can't
right.
do that. We don't have data. I'm
exactly.
just remembering something from a 10-year-old kid. But so that was kind of it. I mean, I did my duty as a kid, poked it with a stick, and I moved on. Now I didn't tell any. Yeah, exactly. And then I didn't stick around too long because I was at the edge of the property, and I didn't actually cross the fence. I was doing this through the barbed wire fence. But people get weird about property lines out there, so I didn't stick around too long. As a kid, I was chased off of places by dogs and shotguns. So I often talk to my older brother in wonder about how we survived childhood out there. There were many times we should have died in places that nobody would ever have found us. So, anyways, I moved on, and I didn't tell anybody about it because you have to remember this is the 80s, and these are the days of satanic panic.
Right.
And if you were a kid that played Dungeons and Dragons, you had to do that in secret, otherwise the church ladies would get you. But so that's actually, at the time, that's where my mind went, is some type of cult activity, because we actually did have one family nearby and several others in the area that it did some weird stuff.
Oh, really?
Ritual. The kids would come to school and they actually had like ritual scarring and stuff, and they would kind of talk about things. And there was weird stuff going on. So that's where my mind went, is that somebody did something like this and then dumped this carcass here after they were done. So I didn't tell anybody about it, because if that's happening in our backyard, then my parents are going to keep me at home and I can't wander around. So I'm not going to tell anybody.
Yeah, red alert. Because I want
to. Right, I want to wander around. Completely unsafe. But that's how you go as a kid. So yeah, and years went by. I remembered the incident. It kind of stuck with me, but I didn't attribute any meaning to it until later on. You start seeing this cattle mutilation stuff, and I think it even took a few times of reading about it or seeing it before I made the connection. And I thought, what, that fit the description. I don't know that that's what that was, and again, it was a long time ago, but it sure does fit the description. So it was certainly worth noting, and it definitely now it's in my mind as something to be curious about and to perhaps relate to all this, because a lot of people do. They want to relate the cattle mutilations. to extraterrestrials and stuff like that. So I think it's worth studying. I've got some ideas on that if you want to include that in the meat of stuff later.
Oh, sure. We'll talk about that because actually you're the first person I've come across that actually had an experience with cattle mutilation, and it's something that I stayed away from in general. And, reason being, it's cattle. You know what I mean? Now,
right.
And, there might be a scientific reason behind someone coming from 4.2 far and checking out the cattle. But, I don't know what that is, and I can't even imagine what that would be besides some good steak. But otherwise, it is what it is. But before we continue, I want to say hello to Ronnie Dawson, who is in the chat box right now. And he's listening live. And anyone that's listening live on Spreaker, you can get on the chat box and kind of send any questions that you might have for Jeff and I during this episode. But as Jeff mentioned, the meat of the matter. And so that's important because, like I said earlier, Jeff has some really good ideas about how to arm the regular blue-collar citizen in this quest, this research, this thing to figure out what in the world UFO and ufology and what people are experiencing is all about. So, Jeff, I'm going to open this up to you, and you give us your ideas on it, and we'll have some conversation behind it.
Sure. It's kind of a big area. There's a lot of stuff to cover. We'll just kind of dig in and get to what we get to. And absolutely, like Manny said, if anybody has questions, that's fun. Type them out. Let us know. Well, you know what? Let's start with this cattle mutilation thing because it's a good example, and I think we can kind of springboard off of that into some of the concepts that you and I have talked about. I guess I was kind of like you maybe when I first heard the stories of cattle mutilations and people trying to attribute them to UFOs. I have no reason to believe that. I may still not. But then, once I realized I've seen that, I've actually, touched that, albeit with a stick. It was a real thing. And so you start looking at this, and if you go out there, you can do research. There's maps of where these things have been sighted. There's that journalist, Linda Moulton Howell, who's done a ton of work on it.
Oh, yeah, she's great, by the way.
I really like what she's doing because she's trying, at least, to take a scientific approach. I don't necessarily think her methods are the best, but she's trying. Where she loses me is when she starts coming up with plasma vortexes and stuff, because where does that come from?
Exactly. Yeah.
And at this point, why do we need that? We are not anywhere near trying to explain weird technology that might help somebody do this. We're nowhere near that point. So if you're a regular guy and you can take a scientific approach, you don't necessarily need a bunch of training. It helps. I highly recommend you go take a laboratory science class, a freshman level class, maybe in physics, but chemistry or biology would be great too, because you'll learn a lot about how to approach things. You'll meet a lot of cool people, and I think you'll have fun, and you'll just improve yourself. So head out to your community college and do that. But this cattle mutilation thing is a perfect example, because if we're going to relate it to UFOs and we want to do science, we need something to study that is physical. And this is about it. We don't have parts of UFOs.
We don't have bits. No, the public doesn't. Wink, wink.
we can talk about that too.
Yeah.
Because I got lots of ideas on that as well. But right now, this is something that an average guy could maybe go see for himself. You could touch it, you could smell it, you could hear the bugs flying around it, you could taste it if you wanted to, but please don't.
No, not after. It has to be in the oven or on a broiler somewhere first.
Exactly, and not rotting in a field, but it's something real. People are trying to attribute to extraterrestrials, and that's okay. Because honestly, if you sit there and you go through some of the steps, that's maybe an okay hypothesis. And here's why. If a lot of the theories involve genetic testing by the government, and as a scientist, if I'm going to look at this as an experiment that somebody is conducting, maybe a scientist in some secret lab or the government, it's a terrible, terrible experimental design.
Oh, it's horrible.
You have no control over these animals. They're just random animals out in herds all over the country. You have no control over what the farmer's doing to them, the conditions they live in, what the animal eats. You're not collecting data on a daily basis, which you need to do. And in order to do that, you need to have access to them all the time. And that these are just cows roaming around. So if you were a government or a scientific facility doing secret research on cows, you would have a facility somewhere with a bunch of cows.
Exactly. It doesn't take much for the government to own a few hundred cattle.
Oh, sure. And they got plenty of space to do it. They got plenty of money to buy cows. We would never know that they were doing this, or maybe not even care. So as far as a scientist looking at this as an experiment, it's just dreadful. I mean, there's too many variables that make the data that you might be collecting really useless or call it into question. The other thing, is risk. Why would you do this? If you're wanting to do a secret experiment, why potentially expose yourself to discovery all the time? And why would you leave behind evidence?
Right. There's
these carcasses laying around that obviously whoever did this doesn't care that we find. So, if you're trying to do a secret experiment, it's bad from every angle. So I think you can start to kind of rule that out. And the other thing is people, when you talk to or you see the veterinarians and scientists that they bring on, they want to talk about predation. And that's a legitimate concern or hypothesis. People then talk about, well, that's not how predators eat an animal. They're going to tear it apart, and they're not precise. They're going to bite off chunks of meat and tear into the skin and leave a big mess. And That's true. They do that. That is observable behavior in predators. So that's not happening. So there's something different. Now, could it still be predators? Sure. I spent a good amount of my time in college studying, doing animal behavior. And so that's kind of what you have to look at. Well, if this is predators, why are they not doing what they usually do? And what you can say is, well, what's missing from the cows is all the soft tissue, the lips, the tongue, the eyes, the easy access to organs through the back end. So you might say that, well, if these predators are scared, they're going to get caught because they're near a farm. They might be in a hurry, so they go after the soft bits. And so that would be a decent hypothesis for looking at animal behavior and predation, because maybe there's coyotes or something that have figured out that they can take the soft bits of the critter and get the heck out of there before the farmer wakes up.
Right, and that makes a lot of sense. But then you have these situations where you have dozens of cattle all at one time, cut up like some wolf was out with a Ginsu knife, just going to town.
Yeah, and you would have to then look into the circumstances around that. Did this happen all one night, or did this happen over several weeks? Because some of these happen in herds that roam over large territories, and the farmer's not necessarily watching them every day. So then he goes out into his field and he finds a bunch of dead cows. Well, did it happen all at one night, or did it happen over several nights? And so you've got to look at all the circumstances around it. If it happened over one night, then yeah, that's pretty weird. But maybe it was a large pack. They were really hungry and also in a hurry. So
exactly, they took out the laser and went to town.
That's exactly what they did. Those laser eyes.
Yeah.
But so the predation theory, you can't just dismiss it, because it could just be behavior that we haven't observed yet. So that's where you can be a scientist and start looking. And if there are wolves in the area, start looking around at what they do and how they behave. Talk to other scientists who do behavior work and ask them, hey, do you ever see these predators in a hurry and they just grab certain bits and go? And they might say no, or they might say, oh yeah, we observe this all the time. And that's the other thing. Science has a lot of separate little bits of stuff that people have discovered and observed, but other people also spend their time putting the pieces together. Right. So when you're doing your research, you need to look for stuff that isn't necessarily related to UFOs or extraterrestrials. You have to look at, you have to go see what animal behaviorists are publishing about wolves in Colorado. And they may have already observed something that fits this description. And so then you start to put those pieces together and you can form a bigger picture. And that's actually how you can talk to scientists. If you go to them and say, hey, I got this cow that was mutilated by aliens, they're probably not going to be interested. But if you say, hey, I see you do work on wolf behavior and predation, and I've got this cow that was killed kind of mysteriously, does this mesh with your research?
Right.
Then they're going to be really interested in talking to you, because you're giving them the potential for more data for work they're already doing.
Exactly. And you know what? A lot of times these individuals that seek out scientists, they have experiences with, let's say, animals, or in certain situations that scientists really hasn't had the opportunity to observe.
Sure.
And that could add significant data to their research and kind of explain some things that they really could not figure out.
Yeah, exactly. And then you're actually getting, professionals' eyes on the subject, and they're gonna look at it, in a very precise way, and that helps you. Even if you're looking for a UFO explanation for this, if that's your hypothesis, this other guy working on a different hypothesis, he helps you too, because he may eliminate things or give you extra information, and that helps you decide, okay, I'm wasting my time, or okay, he is not coming up with an explanation no matter how hard he tries. So even if you work with people who aren't looking for UFOs, you can get really good information.
Right.
Even if that's your goal.
So what's your hypothesis on the cattle mutilations?
That's I kind of like the idea that it could be a predation behavior that we're not necessarily familiar with. As regular everyday people, we think of animals just tearing up a carcass and digging in. Maybe they don't always do that. So I think that's a good hypothesis to test, and that's what you do. You form a hypothesis and then you design an experiment to test it. Some of those experiments involve observation out in the wild of wolves or coyotes or whatever it might be in certain conditions. Watching their behavior and getting that data. The other thing that you could do is, if you really wanted to, you could go probably to a place that processes cattle, right, and go get a head and create a vice grip device that kind of mimics the jaws. See if you can grab on to the lips, give it a yank, and see if they come off really neatly. Because
and then the kids and the wife
happens.
walks in, and then you got to explain that, Jeff. It's not.
Well, that could be kind of fun or not.
Yeah.
It depends on how well you like your family. But
Exactly.
maybe tell them what you're doing first. But
Yeah,
you
forewarn
could do
them.
that.
Something funky is about to happen. But here's
Maybe
my
your neighbors.
hypothesis on the cattle stuff. And I just watched The Conjuring 2 last night, by the way. And I really feel that there is a majority of the time is the occult that has something to do with this.
Okay.
Because when you think about it, advanced civilizations coming here just to check out the cattle I don't get it. It doesn't make sense to me. And like when you were saying the government, well, like we said, these guys could have acres and acres of cattle that they can do their thing, get rid of the evidence, and no one would know anything.
Exactly.
So that kind of leaves you with some people out there who have this belief that they're going to sacrifice some animals, get the insides, and appease somebody. And that really is what rings true to me. I just don't see it any other way. And maybe it was because I was watching The Conjuring. I want to say hello to Rachel. Rachel, welcome to the show. You're listening live. Thanks for listening. So, Jeff, let's talk about E.T., aliens, those civilizations 4.2 far that seem to be eluding us for it seems like hundreds of years.
Okay, so are you referring to like ancient alien type stuff or?
Oh, don't get me started with ancient aliens. I'm just talking about just in general, kind of like your sighting. Like we have Ronnie Dawson on, so Ronnie had his own experience, and then you have people everywhere who are contactees, abductees, every single walk of life that you can think of, and there is data there. But I think what we're talking about is how can we apply the rigors of science to something like ufology when we know it's a pseudoscience and every turn it takes a hit. I mean,
absolutely.
Ufology really shouldn't even be a pseudoscience. I'm sorry I got to say that. Because there's nothing strict about it. And the problem is that your phenomena, it doesn't repeat itself in any specific way. So
right.
Yeah, so let's talk about that.
Okay, well, if we want to move it out of the realm of pseudoscience or even soft science into a hard science, that's our responsibility.
Right.
We need to do better. We need to educate ourselves. We need to question ourselves. Why am I doing this? Why am I interested in UFOs? Is it because and sometimes you have to dig kind of deep because you may not realize this is what you're doing, but do I need to believe in a higher power? And Christianity or any of the other religions just don't do it for me, so I'm looking for aliens to guide me. You need to ask yourself that stuff, and
right.
Because that sort of goal or approach, whether it's a spiritual approach or a scientific approach, that drives how you do things. And if it's a spiritual approach, then you don't need data for that, and that's okay. If that's what you want to do, by all means. You're not, as long as you're not hurting anybody and it helps you, go for it.
Yeah, but you know what? And let me just kind of jump in there real quick. The spiritual approach, for some reason, when people look at religion and spirituality, when it comes to UFOs and ET and things like that, they really aren't open to any other conversation. Right. Do you find that?
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. But that's part of what they need. Right. And when, if somebody's trying to tell them something different, that starts to break down what they've built up. And, of course they're going to have a bad reaction to it. So, that's why, sometimes these different approaches, they don't need to intersect and probably shouldn't intersect. Now, if you're a scientific type of person, you can still study this spiritual side because, it's its own phenomenon. It's more in the realm of psychology, but it's still cool to study that. So why do people need to believe this? Why do they behave this way? It's no different than believing in any other religion. It's worthy of study, but it doesn't necessarily help us figure out what the crap in the sky is.
Right. The crap is right.
But kind of going back to what we were saying is question yourself and question the people you talk to, to kind of determine where they're coming from. And if you're taking this spiritual approach, just at least recognize that, because I think that will help you out.
Right.
In the long run. If you recognize what you're really doing, then you can focus all your time on doing that. You don't need videos of UFOs. You don't need data. You don't need barometric pressure the night I saw, the cylinder in the sky. You don't need that stuff. So why would you punish yourself with, looking at it or talking to people about it?
Right.
And on the flip side, if you're going to take a scientific approach, if you're not interested in studying the psychology of, the spiritual side of this, if that doesn't interest you, you don't necessarily need to dig into that. Now, it doesn't mean you don't need to kind of cross over and talk to people, because you might get, useful information either way.
Right.
But it helps you know where you need to focus. So, and then the other thing is, once you figure out how you really want to approach it, if the answer is scientifically, take a look at all the stuff you've been looking at, all the information, all the stuff that you think, all your hypotheses and theories, and really look at them critically and decide, hey, this helps me try and figure out what lights in the sky are, and this really doesn't, because we don't really know that gray aliens from a certain star actually exist. Do you need that information? No, you may or may not. So you just really, I urge people to think about their methodology, think about their goals, think about their reasons for doing this, and really think critically about the information that they have already. And it could be anything, but really separate the mythology from data.
That's right, because you really have to have some kind of skepticism in what you're doing, especially when it comes to ufology.
Yeah, and skepticism, skeptic, that gets thrown around a lot, and it's good. It's a useful term, and yeah, we should be skeptic about things. But more importantly, even if we put skepticism aside, if we just ask the question, this thing in front of me, this video or this story or this information, can I do something with it? Can I break out my math and figure something out? Does it answer any questions?
Right.
And you don't necessarily need to be skeptical to do that. And that's how you're going to get the interest of science or scientists, is having information that they can do something with. Coming to them with a video of a light in the sky and a story, they're not going to want to do anything with that. And it's not because, they think you're a kook necessarily, or that they don't believe that it's possible. It's just you're giving them one point of data, and maybe not even good data. You can't do anything with that. You need lots and lots and lots of data.
Right. Well, think about science too. When you're doing an experiment, you're not so much focused on the hypothesis. You're interested in what's going on with the null hypothesis, right? So that's what you're looking at. Now,
right.
More early on in my college days, I came across Socrates, right? And I kind of like what he said, about the way you live life. And you kind of have to put this and apply it to ufology. So Socrates says the way you live life best is you take the via mediocrita which is you take the middle lane. You know what I mean? So I think a ufologist who really wants to really take everything in, and we already said ufology is not a real thing, but as a ufologist, you want to balance. You want to balance your religious beliefs or whatever they may be with your scientific knowledge. And even if you don't have scientific knowledge, guess what? It's out there. This is not like about 30 years ago when there was no knowledge or knowledge was hard to gain. The information is out there. I mean, you can look up anything. You want to figure out what the heck pi really means? Go to your internet. It's there. You know?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
You want to figure out a quadratic equation? Knock yourself out. Plenty of videos. They'll explain the whole thing to you. The information is there. You just have to be able to educate yourself. And the scientific principles and the scientific method should be part of the conversation whenever you're thinking about investigating any type of, ufology or UFO incident, which, MUFON kind of does a little bit of that, but I just think that the way they investigate stuff is not thorough enough.
It seems to me like, I kind of meant to say this earlier, but it seems to me like, and this goes back to when I was first looking around and I got on their website and started looking through their stuff. It seems like they're tired, right. And they're just kind of phoning it in a way. And maybe they've lost a lot of people, or everybody has their jobs and their life, and they just can't put much time into it. And maybe they're not getting new blood there. Right. I don't know. It just seems like they're fatigued. And that happens. It's not their fault.
It kind of goes back to what you said earlier about listening to these UFO shows where they regurgitate the same thing over and over, and then they're not putting any new perspectives into it. It's always the same story. It's always Roswell, Rendlesham. Well, give me something new. If you want to talk about these, which of course we got to acknowledge, they're incredible stories. Well, give me something new. These guys are dying off. Once the last of the few die off, there's nothing more.
Yeah, and it's this field that's been around for a long time. People have been talking about it for a long time, and of course we're going to get tired of it because after all this time, we still don't know anything.
Exactly.
All we know is that it is a phenomenon. I mean, we see this stuff. People do see it.
Right.
So there's something now. What is it? That's what we really got to start digging into. And in order to do that, we can't just go out and turn on our phone camera and capture a light in the sky. We got to do better.
Exactly.
And you got to take your field notebook. Scientists carry a field notebook out when they go to study something, and they make notes. And they make a lot of notes. And they may not use all the information, but it's there. So if you're going out and you want to go look at UFOs, get your camera, get a good camera. We have so much technology available to us that we didn't have before. Really good technology. And get some gear, save up money, whatever you got to do. But more importantly, even if you just have a normal phone camera, if you're going out to look for UFOs, get your field notebook. When you start, write down the temperature, the weather conditions, the barometric pressure. Write that down every hour, because later on, if you see something, you can go back and look at the barometric pressure and did it change? You can plot that out on a little graph, and maybe there's a correlation, maybe not. Either way, that's a discovery. Maybe this stuff relates. The other thing, too, is when you go to a scientist and you say, I've got this mysterious thing, I don't know what it is, but you have all this other data, and he wants to say, I think it may be an atmospheric phenomenon. Okay, well, here's all my weather data, and he looks at that and goes, well, no, that doesn't fit. When you have all this extra data, scientists get more interested, because they can actually work with it. There's something that they can do. They can answer questions, So, and in science, it's just as important to know what something isn't as
to what it is.
Right. And now the other side of the conversation with scientists is that many of them really don't want to be associated with the topic of UFOs and ETs.
Well, why the hell would they? I mean,
right. There you go.
If you got somebody who is really excited about UFOs and, they have a video, they could have a great video, and they go to a scientist and they're like, yeah, look at this video. You know what? I think it's gray aliens, and I think they just abducted somebody, and I think they're doing this testing. And wait, what? Why?
Exactly.
Yeah, you're going to scare that person off. And rightly so. They shouldn't be listening to you if that's how you're approaching it, or approaching them, because they're not interested in the mythology. They're interested. They might actually be interested in that video, but now they're not going to look at it because of all this extra stuff that we've attached to it. That we kind of need to cull away. It's really cool to talk about that stuff, and it's fun to theorize about, and go for it. It's kind of neat to hear all this stuff, but when you're trying to actually answer questions, you gotta set that stuff aside,
right?
Because there's no proof. You don't have any proof of all this extra stuff. All you've got is, say, a photograph or a video, and if you're really diligent, you got a bunch of extra data that you kept track of, which I highly encourage people to start doing.
So, Jeff, I have a question for you. Since you're educated in the ways of biology, now a few years ago, I knew an individual who was writing a thesis on the eye and the division capabilities of pigeons. So, I know that's not really exciting, pigeons and all, but
it could be.
It could be. For him, it was. For me, it was like, okay, they see me. So, but one thing that has kind of rung true for me when it comes to like UFOs and things like that is the fact that we don't see the entire visual spectrum. And
right.
I'm talking about in our eyesight.
Correct.
What are your thoughts on that as far as could some of this be happening outside of our visual spectrum, and do you think that maybe this is something that could be leveraged in UFO research?
That is entirely possible. There's no reason to believe that couldn't be possible. That we know for a fact that there are ranges of energy that are not detectable with our senses. We can prove that. Every scientist is going to agree with that. There's just stuff outside the range of our ability. Like right now, if you walked outside, it's springtime, there's a lot of flowers. And you look at a flower and it's a white flower. If you could see the UV range, you'd probably see all kinds of patterns on that flower that we don't see. And bees actually can see that stuff. And, that kind of helps them navigate into flowers or choose which flowers that they like better. I've actually, one of the professors that taught one of my animal behavior classes, she actually did a bunch of research on flower choice in bees, and it has a lot to do with their senses that go beyond ours. So that stuff is out there. Now, as far as using that to perhaps see UFOs better, yeah, absolutely. If you have a camera that sees in infrared, which a lot of them do now, flip that on, check it out. All you're doing with the regular camera is just catching a light up in the sky dancing around. Flip on the IR, see what you get. You're not going to know unless you try.
Right. There might be something more there.
Right, and I think there are cameras that you can get that have a broader spectrum that may even get into the UV range. I don't know how pricey they are. I'm sure they're pricier than regular cameras, but we need people to start, getting those and using them. We're not really getting anywhere with videos and pictures of lights in the sky with a regular camera. We've been doing that for a long time. And, we're still just looking at little dots on a screen. So, yeah, absolutely. Try that stuff. That there's no reason to think that it would be wasted time.
Right. So, Jeff, we're down to our last few minutes of the show. And one of the things that brought us to this point today was the idea of creating a network. And I really think, and I think you agreed, that if we can create some kind of a network of people interested and willing to do research, that we might be able to get somewhere.
Absolutely. That idea was prompted when you had your last show with Kyle, and I kind of liked what he was saying too in his approach. And it made me wonder, why aren't you guys working together? And there's got to be more people out there like that. Bring your shows together, make a network, a media network, because people are, like me, who see something and now they're curious. It's a quagmire out on the internet. And honestly, I came across your show by chance. I was just searching through podcasts, and it was a great find. It was really good.
Thank you. I resemble that statement.
Exactly. You should. You should be proud. But more importantly, it was by random chance that I found it. So people like me and your other listeners who are genuinely curious, but they don't want, a lot of the other stuff that's going to turn them away. And that's the other thing is, if we're going to be responsible students, we got to help people, find these good forums and good shows because, like I said, I was just on my own. I found it by chance, and everybody else is too. And there's a lot of people out there, I bet, who are genuinely curious. They've maybe seen something, and they don't know where to go to get information or to tell their story or to talk about stuff. And, I think creating a good network like that, where you have a lot of people doing good work on their shows, giving good information instead of bad information, get rid of the clickbait type of stuff, because that's what everybody sees, and it's honestly a huge detractor. If you guys could work together, make a network, all of us, create forums where we talk about stuff and really get everybody in together to kind of work on answering these questions and not just making up stuff. That would be so huge.
Yeah, I think you're right. And one of the biggest gaps that we've had in trying to bridge something like that is the fact that some of these other shows, quote unquote, their personalities are huge, and they're basically, they've been on for so long that they're really just about, making that income from the show, selling this, selling that, and basically, keeping their audience and not really introducing them to anybody else with a different perspective or on the topic.
Exactly. And it's not just UFOs. It's in politics. You see all the people, the personalities that create shows, and they're not really doing anything good. It's just entertainment, right. But people take it so seriously.
Right. And then the other thing is that people really are afraid to come forward. I mean, I've been at a UFO conference, and you're sitting there. I mean, you are surrounded by people who have been dealing with UFOs for years and have been researching and everything. And even in that situation, they're still afraid to talk about it. It's such a weird thing.
Oh, yeah, and it's not their fault. They just don't know where to go.
Right.
And that's kind of something we can all fix. If we kind of work together, you and Kyle, and I'm sure there's other people out there doing shows and research that can come in and, kind of get together, make a network, pool of resources. You've got listeners, he's got listeners. Together you got a bunch more, So I really encourage people to kind of step up. If you've got talents, are you a web designer? Get in touch with Manny and Kyle, and I'm sure they'd be happy to work with you.
Absolutely. So, Jeff, you've just completed your first show at UFO Buster Radio. What do you think?
This was a lot of fun, Manny. I really appreciate you having me on here. A couple of months ago when I started doing this, I wouldn't have imagined I'd, be on a podcast talking about UFOs. But it's a worthy subject, and it definitely deserves attention, better attention than it's getting. and we can all make that happen. So really appreciate you having me on here and letting me hopefully inspire a few people to do some good work.
Well, listen, I'm glad I got you on, because I've had it in the back of my mind for the longest to get you on here to talk about this, and I think that we're going to continue to work on this whole networking idea. So Jeff, we'll keep the conversation going, and when we got something together, I want you to come back so that we can introduce whatever we come up with.
Absolutely. I'd be more than happy to do that.
So this is UFO Buster Radio. I'm on the phone, and we're about to sign off. So Jeff, any last words for the folks out there listening to you all over the world? Because it's crazy how many countries we actually get listens from.
That's good, though. You're reaching a lot of people. Just, if you're out there and if you're like me and maybe you've seen something, maybe you haven't, maybe you're just interested, look around, do some research, be critical, and, see what you can contribute to this, because it needs people working on it, because it's just a quagmire out there. It's very stagnant, and we really can do a lot of work to clean it up and get good information.
I concur. So, folks, the guys that have been on listening live, like Rachel and Ronnie, and all of those who didn't get a chance to get on the chat box, and those listening later on during the week, I thank you, as always, for listening. This is UFO Buster Radio. Manny I can't even say my name right. Manny Moonraker. This is why I don't like live shows, Jeff.
Oh, no, this was great.
Manny Moonraker signing off. Sayonara. Hasta la vista, baby. We'll chat with you later. Ciao.